Hello. Hi, I'm Lisa Anderson, president of ASCM Inland Empire Chapter, and I'm also president of LMA Consulting Group. We are excited today to talk about what's going on in the supply chain as a part of our webinar series. And I am actually your host and your speaker today, so I can play a dual role. So I'm excited to be here, and we have a lot to talk about. There's a lot going on in supply chain. All you have to do is turn on the news, and you might become frightened about all these crazy things happening between Greenland, Venezuela, and China, and who knows what else. So I will go ahead and start to share my slide deck here. All right. Right, share. Okay, very good. Can you all see the can you all see the screen? Well, I think so. So if anybody cannot, let me know, and I will pay attention to that. And Tony, if you can turn off, your if you see things coming across that I should be aware of, if you can just alert me, that'd be great. All right, so supply chain, are we smoothing out or something else? What's going on in the supply chain? So I thought we'd start with, where we've come from. So in the old days, it used to be a simple supply chain that we were dealing with, we had suppliers, we had customers, we had multiple tiers in our supply chain, but it was relatively simple. But over the last 10 or 20 years, the supply chain has gone global, and things have become far more complex. We've had some key members and CEOs in our ASCM Inland Empire that have told us about situations where they're a manufacturer in the Inland Empire, but they have production going on overseas, and then the product might go back and forth multiple times before it even finishes, and that's not necessarily a abnormal supply chain. So things have definitely gone global in the last 10 years, and things were focused on really the Amazon effect. Everybody was thinking about how do we serve clients quicker. We wanted visibility and immediate service, but we weren't necessarily thinking about what would happen if things broke down in our global supply chain. So what we'll do now is go through several of the risks and disruptions, and I have a lot of content, but with that said, I'm happy to take questions as we go and or at the end. So just let me know. All right, so we have from a manufacturing mining and China is probably the largest geopolitical risk, although of course there's always a lot going on in the global supply chain. But China is definitely one of the largest risks. They've dominated manufacturing. They produce 30% of the world's manufacturing output, and that impacts 80% of what's manufactured in the world. 80% is a large number. So it's definitely a risk. From a rare earth point of view, which we'll talk about several times because it relates to a lot of what's going on in today's world, and APIs, which is active pharmaceutical ingredients, which is similar to a rare earth conceptually because it's what's needed to go into producing pharmaceutical ingredients. And rare earths are needed for almost everything that we consider to be vital today. So all electronics, medical devices, defense, I could go on and on, but it's needed for almost everything. So 71% of the global rare earths are mined in China, and they control 90% of the refining and separation capacity. So that is concerning, to say the least. And they also control 80% of some part of the API supply chain. So these are large numbers. And so that's why this has been such a hot topic. And it is a problem because during the tariff discussions, tariffs aside, like there's a lot of hoopla about tariffs. But if we just think about it, regardless of what's happening, rare earths were cut off from the world, not just the US, during this time frame. And so that's a problem, because it goes into health and everyday life. And then computer chips, China produces 60% of the world's chips. They're typically speaking not the advanced ones, because Taiwan dominates the advanced chips. So also from a China point of view, we have I don't know, I guess you could say they believe that they control the South China Seas, which impacts up to 40% of global maritime trade. So that's, sort of like you're patrolling your street, if you will, in front of your house. Well, that's a rather busy street. So that's another issue or choke point. They also have used the Belt and Road Initiative to dominate supply chains throughout the world. So in a way, they've done some good. They've invested in infrastructure in many places. On the other hand, they've been extremely targeted to get the infrastructure that relates to dominating things like rare earths. So that's been going on for the last 20 years or maybe even longer. And then they've also under zero COVID, for example, similar to the rare earths, they wanted to do a zero COVID policy. And so they can in China, it's not like the US, so they can just stop manufacturing from happening in certain areas of the country or overall if they want to. Like they actually shut everything down for the Olympics as well because they wanted to solve the pollution problem while people were there. So that's China. Now, close behind this and related to China, of course, is Taiwan. And Taiwan produces 90% of the world's advanced computer chips. So, in requiring advanced talent, and that's obviously partly why China is continually threatening Taiwan with various military exercises and things like that. So it's not a place that I want to be living right now. But nevertheless, that's what's happening in Taiwan. And they also face like millions of cyber attacks every day, as an example. So moving on to the Middle East, which has also been quite the challenge in the last few years. There's some critical choke points, like, for example, the Suez Canal. So the Suez Canal controls 30% of global shipping container volume. And it was shut down, in essence, because after the Israel and Hamas, I don't know, I guess we'll call it war, broke out on October 7th, then the now Iran-backed Houthi rebels started attacking ships in the Suez Canal. So obviously, companies can't afford to risk the lives of the ships and/or have the ship sink, but neither is good. Obviously, lives are worse. So they have to go around the southern tip of Africa or follow a different route. So nevertheless, the Suez Canal has been a big choke point in the supply chain. Also, this Middle East war, which is calming down, in the last year with all the events taking place. Now there's I don't know what to call it, but I guess the Gaza peace proposal that's slowly being rolled out and is fraught with like challenges, of course. But nevertheless, during this whole process, there was also a situation where pagers started exploding for Hezbollah operatives in Lebanon and Syria. Now, that is quite concerning from a supply chain standpoint because it means that obviously something got to the pagers. Some of the parts of the pager, basically they could explode on demand, right? So this is something we want to avoid in our supply chains, clearly. We definitely don't want exploding, medical devices, to say the least. So then the next is, of course, like something very much in the news right now is, Venezuela, Greenland, Latin America, what's going on with Cuba. So what is all this about? Well, I mean, obviously the Venezuela situation, there was Maduro was under, like basically the arrest of Maduro is what started all this, but it also has a lot to do with supply chain. So Venezuela has the largest proven oil reserves in the world, and they used to be an original member of OPEC, which I learned recently. I didn't realize that. But their production has been extremely limited, so they're no longer seen as huge in oil because at their peak they produced 3 million barrels per day, and now they've declined to under a million. But the potential is there, and so that's part of what's going on with Venezuela, and that part of how they can also improve their situation so they don't have as many. They can improve the lives of the people there if they can figure out how to do this in a better way. What's been happening, however, is that the oil flows were going to like Iran, Russia, and China, and now they are starting to be sold at market. So now the question is, how do we work all this, or how does it get worked out? So nevertheless, that's what's going on in Venezuela, and it definitely does relate to the Latin American and America's supply chain. Greenland is on the other end here in the, above, obviously, north, near the, in the Arctic. So what is all this hoopla about Greenland? Well, from a supply chain point of view, unrelated to all this, crazy talk, if you will. But there's a lot going on from a supply chain point of view. And that is there's three key things. One is that they have one of the largest reserves of rare earths outside of China. And I already explained that China dominates that. That's highly problematic. So that could be an issue. That could be an opportunity. On the other hand, it's not as easy as like just going out and, rare earths isn't something you snap your fingers and do, but it's certainly not something you snap your fingers and do in the Arctic. So it's not like it's easy, but it does exist. It's also, by the way, rare earths are not really rare. It's just that the processing of rare earths is rare. Otherwise, China wouldn't dominate it by 90%. But it's not that we as in, the rest of the world couldn't do it. It's just we've chosen not to. So but it does take time. As everybody knows on this call, supply chains, you don't just ramp up anything in a day. By no means do you ramp up rare earth mining and processing. So anyway, so that's the rare earths. The second thing is it is a vital location for defense for the North America region. So meaning like if missiles were to come from Russia or China, they go right over Greenland. So similar to supply chain, you want early warning signals, and you want to be able to do something about like for impending problems. Certainly impending missiles would be an impending problem. So that's building up the ability to utilize some of the latest technologies and ones that would distinguish, for example, what are they called? Hyper missiles. It doesn't sound quite right, but something like that. That they're really fast, basically. And so there's the defense. And then the third thing is there's potential shipping lanes. Again, not easy because it's in the Arctic. But right now, as I've explained, there's a Suez Canal issue. And then I'll explain in a few minutes, there's also Panama Canal issues that's been going on. So it provides additional lanes that would go from Asia to the Americas, which is an important thing. And one of the two here, the Transpolar Sea Route, avoids areas that are owned by Russia and or controlled, which is obviously potentially problematic because Russia is also, not somebody that you really want to have controlling what you're doing. And it's, basically it's all in international waters. So it's a possibility, but it's not easy because you have to have ice vessels and all sorts of other things to deal with it. So there's that going on. And then there's like cyber risks and vulnerabilities. And so I've listed some of them out here, but I would say there's solar, like I've listed some of the examples, but the key problems here is there's cyber challenges related to infrastructure. Again, infrastructure is key, and it's also key. It's key to defense. It's key to like receive goods from China, like rare earths, because infrastructure is ports, if you will. So there's a lot of water, electricity, which we'll talk about further. So nevertheless, we have to keep an eye out for cyber. I've actually had more than one client that have had cyber issues before or after I worked with them. And either way, it can be devastating. Luckily, they both were medium to large companies, and they were able to get through it. But a lot of small companies just simply go out of business. So it's a serious concern. And then there's natural resources, which is what a lot of this is about. I mentioned Venezuela, and it's somewhat about the oil and gas resources. Our energy needs, and I think I have a slide on this, but I'll say it now. Oh, well, here it is. So energy needs are going to be exploding, and we're not going to be able to stop it because artificial intelligence is starting to be used in almost everything. We all use ChatGPT, but it's not just that. It's being utilized in supply chain technologies, in autonomous vehicles. I mean, I could go on and on. Artificial intelligence is going to grow demand by 50%, and that's conservatively. Generally, and that's annually. And generally speaking, a lot of the numbers are far more than that. So we, in essence, need all forms of energy. So, solar, wind, oil, everything. But nevertheless, here that is part of what's been going on here is that China, as an example, has been permitting for I can't remember if it's one or two, but we'll say one coal plant per week. That's crazy, and obviously not environmentally friendly. So nevertheless, oil and gas is used everywhere in the supply chain. It's not only about, cars and, gas, and shipping lanes. That's not even the biggest thing. It's really used in manufacturing processes. It's used obviously to heat homes. It's used for almost everything, including AI. So there's a need, and it's used for example, plastic and pretty much everything. So somewhere in the process, it's going to be used, and it's produced at scale, which is very hard to undo something that's at scale, which is why China's the challenge, because they produce at scale in general. So nevertheless, that's some of the energy is key. It can be supplemented with solar, wind to whatever degree that makes sense. Nuclear, there's a lot of opportunities there. But remember, because something is good and you can get 100% improvement, it's not, even 100% improvement sounds really good. It's not really good these days. You need vast improvements. So you have to be able to do whatever it is at scale. So add one here and there is not going to help us. I mean, it's something to do, but it's not going to be it's not going to get us there, if you will. A wind or water and energy power supply chains, commodities and rare earths. I in essence talked about rare earths already, but commodities are key here as well. So copper, silver, they go in a lot of these processes and in a lot of our specialized electronics. A lot of this does go back to many years ago. I remember when no one had cell phones. And now it's a normal thing to have two cell phones even. And that's just one minor example. So, but if you think about it that way, every phone, every laptop, every oven, it's crazy. The amount of electronics we have and what's needed in terms of commodities, rare earths, energy, even water, to fuel a supply chain and manufacturing. Also, food and fertilizer relates to this as well. We have a better situation than a lot of other areas in the world. However, we should make sure that we can continue to supply the right food and fertilizer to move forward. For example, fertilizer has, a lot of it used to come from Russia, Ukraine region, and that was certainly problematic when that war broke out. So that's that. So natural resources are really the future when it comes to supply chains. Now, some more risks and disruptions. It's not all horrible. We'll have good things, doing forward. But we should know what position we're in, and then we'll go from there, right? You have to know where you're starting, what's your reality, and then we figure out a good way forward. The good news is that you're all in this type of a webinar, which means that you are going to have vast opportunities for success because they need high-skilled supply chain professionals to be successful in today's world. The Panama Canal is another key choke point. Currently, it's largely fine, but for the last couple of years, it has not been fine. Like it takes goods from Northeast Asia to the East Coast as one example, and there's other, it does other things as well. But there was a drought in Panama that caused a 50% cut in capacity, which is huge. I mean, obviously, it means that the ships, there's the expedite fees, everything went up in price, part of our inflationary story, right? At the same time, like more important than that, like obviously 50% is a problem. So then where could they go? They could go to the Suez Canal. Well, then you have people attacking and trying to kill you. So again, why the Arctic path might be better, or they might go, there's only so many ways you can go. Depends where you're going from and where you're going to. So nevertheless, companies are resilient. You have to be looking ahead and making sure that you have many paths to get places. And then there's weather-related incidents, which kind of relates to the Panama Canal in terms of the drought. But there was Hurricane Helene, which caused, for example, the Baxter facility that supplied 60% of U.S. dialysis solutions and IV fluids to shut down, which caused havoc. Not surprisingly, 60% in one facility is a problem. Again, diversification, and where is it coming from? And that was being produced in the U.S. So, it's not like you move everything to the U.S. and everything's solved. You don't have to think anymore. It's not that way either. And in Germany, they had severe floods, and it disrupted like 25 suppliers across various supply chains, and it created havoc, which you may or may not have heard about. But, of course, if you were there, if you were in supply chain in those fields, you would be, talking all about it. And then there's potential strikes. There's been like several in the last like probably 4 years, maybe. There's been like several like potential strikes that cause like havoc. And then there was some strikes that did occur, like for example, Boeing. And then there was some supply chain or logistics related strikes too. And then, of course, there's the whole tariffs and trade deals saga, which has definitely created, we could do a whole presentation on tariffs and trade deals, but what I would summarize here, and I can come back to it if you have questions, but overall, I've been saying since the beginning, I thought it would be mildly inflationary, which has so far turned out to be true. And that it would probably be more of a negotiating tool. And we have ended up with trade deals for many countries that have, I guess you could say, like the positive side of this is it's opened up access for us to export to some of these places. Like typically speaking, it's going to be aerospace, like Boeing, and Boeing has like a ton of orders now, but Boeing and like agricultural products is a lot of what's opened up access to. On the other hand, consumer products coming in have definitely experienced price increases. From a manufacturing point of view, it overall, largely China has absorbed a lot of the price increases because they did want to continue to ship into the U.S., but some have been passed on. So as I said, some of them is mildly inflationary. And it also did create business instability for a while these trade deals be worked out, which caused volumes to go down, like backlogs where like customers put a halt on orders which caused, manufacturing has been in a recession now since late 2022. Obviously, that can't be completely blamed on tariffs, but it did extend it. So, nevertheless, now that the tariffs and the trade deals have been worked out, and there's a lot of investments coming back into the U.S., as well as other advantages. There's some good points and bad points, but some of the good points are starting to like carry over, and we're starting to see across clients the volume and quotes pick up. So that's encouraging. I actually think we're going to probably go from in a manufacturing point of view, from bust, which we've been in for like 3 years now, to boom, which is good and bad because most manufacturers are like skeptical that whether sales is like drinking something over there or if it's really going to happen. And so, can they scale up fast enough is the question. So nevertheless, that's that. Now we also have like a skills gap going on here. If that wasn't enough, we have more problems. So, AI is transforming supply chains. We could do a whole nother webinar on this topic, but in essence, lower skilled roles are going to be automated and replaced by AI largely. But more high skilled roles are needed, and more like people who can like look at data and say, oh yeah, this doesn't make sense, but we need to tweak it this way and that way. Well, that's not easy to come by. So it's going to be a real challenge. And it's also a real challenge for newer hires because, they might be starting off in the lower skilled, they're learning. So the smarter companies are going to get in front of this in a smart way. So we can talk more about that, but that's a problem. And then from an offshoring manufacturing talent, since we've been offshoring a lot of manufacturing, some of the talent and skills have gone with it. So we don't really have like mining expertise like we used to have. And so, some of our lean concepts are still good, but they're not enough at all. So that's basically one thing to think about. And then, of course, the baby boomers are retiring. And I have to say, the generation that follows them is much smaller and getting frustrated, and even some of them are retiring. So that's not really good, actually, as far as the whole supply chain goes, because we do need some experience to like make sure that we don't do crazy things that AI might suggest that we do. And then what's the current state of our supply chain? We do have a ton of investments. I started to tell you about this already, but there's 15, well, it depends. I would say between $9 and $20 trillion. That depends on who you listen to and who you believe and whether they're double counting anything. But 9 trillion, 20 trillion, whatever, it's a lot of trillions. And so basically it's in mining, manufacturing, shipbuilding, data centers, computer chips. Actually, there's been a lot of talk recently about all thank goodness, we're like starting to produce some of our computer chips, even the advanced ones, because Taiwan had absolute control, 90% of that. And so we need to be able to, of course, we just worked out a trade deal with Taiwan. So that's fabulous. And they're investing in our ability to make computer chips here. Of course, remember, they are also being threatened from China. So like there's like a lot of moving parts here. But nevertheless, there's a lot of investments, and also on the pharmaceutical side. Thank goodness, I have to say, because like after all, we are an aging, there's aging populations, and we don't need APIs turned off. Definitely don't want that. So nevertheless, there is a lot of investments, though. That's why I say I truly believe we're going to go from bust to boom, but unfortunately, in a way, it's never convenient for operations and manufacturing, right? So we just have to think about this in a smart way and prepare without like increasing our costs dramatically, or in many cases you should be able to mitigate it with with like automation technology, which we'll talk about. I already talked about the trade deals, but I listed some of them here, but there's like some of these trade deals relate to rare earths. Some of them relate to automotive. Why is automotive important? Well, it does relate back to the ability to produce and defense, in addition to just, automobiles. And then there's, like I said, some of you want the ability to increase agricultural spending, that kind of thing. And so there's also a lot of investments right now in smart manufacturing and supply chains. And so there's a lot going on when it comes to investments. So it's now I believe it's going just similar to how China produces 50% of the world's output, I think is what I said. I don't know, I have to look back at the slide. But it affects 80%. It's similar here. Whether or not the investments are directly in your industry, almost 80% of all industries will be impacted, and they will, if they want to succeed, they will find ways to, I mean, they're going to be involved in these like expansion opportunities. On the other hand, if you're I think it's going to be more companies like either will be really successful or really not successful. If you're like waiting around for it to, somebody to explain it to you, if you will, instead of going out and figuring it out, well, you will miss the opportunity. I talked a little bit about this already, and I see there's another question, so I'll look at it while I'm talking, or at least I'm going to give it a go. But basically, I mentioned most of this. So I talked about the business stability and how it relates to tariffs, so I'm not going to go through that again, but it is stabilizing. Like, in essence, sure, there's tariffs that were just talked about related to Greenland, and they went away, and there could be something else tomorrow. But generally speaking, companies know, I should say, which countries are likely to have. I mean, some of the trade agreements are worked out, and some of them are clear what they're likely to be. So you have more stability for sure. And then from a competitiveness standpoint, there was a tax act that was passed legislation wise that in essence extends attractive, competitive, I should say, with the world tax rates for businesses and corporations, like big and small. And then it does encourage investments in manufacturing. So it's good for our industry because it's encouraging R&D, expansion of buildings and capacity, equipment, that type of thing. And then the third thing that's makes me think we're going to go from bust to boom is the cost of capital. Now, that's a little trickier because that's, our interest rates have been high. Even though they started to come down, it's like small potatoes compared to how like we may have committed to things when, money was sort of free, in quotes, because of course it's never free, but it was close to free. So you get used to like making decisions with close to free money, 5%, 6%, not free. So, it adds up, and that's been definitely a headwind, especially in like larger purchases. But it is starting to come in the right direction. So things are starting to add up with these drivers in the supply chain. So we also have been focused a lot post-COVID on resiliency and efficiency. And that's still needed. We must be more resilient. Obviously, we have to have backup sources of supply. It's like common sense. We didn't have them really. A lot of cases, we found that we really didn't have backups, even if we thought we did during COVID. So it's not, we have to be smarter. We have to diversify our risk. We can't have all of our backups in the same city, like Wuhan, China or something. We can't even really have them in the same country. Or if they're going by a choke point, like the Suez Canal or something, you have to think much differently than you used to have to think. So there's like a whole increased level of thinking you need there. And then we're moving towards regional supply chains so that we can have more control over our supply chain in a way where we can respond to changing customer conditions more quickly, and in a way that we're partnering with, folks where we can be more resilient that are close by, in essence. So there's a lot of reshoring. But I have to say, a lot of times we're not talking about it like reshoring, because who in their right mind is going to say, hey, China supplier, I'm leaving and going to find I'm going to bring production back and like help me through this transition. Well, they're going to drop you like a rock. So instead, what folks are doing is expanding manufacturing either domestically or like they may have other locations in regions where their costs, maybe they're high labor content product and they want to like keep it to a place with lower labor costs. Then they might go to Latin America as an example, because that's closer in this region, or Mexico. On the other hand, they could also look at redesigning their product, and then maybe they would be better off automating it and utilizing advanced technologies and producing it very close to their customers, which probably might be in the US. So it just depends. But there's a definite expansion of domestic manufacturing and a focus on regional supply chains, which is why the Venezuela Greenland topic also kind of relates to a regional supply chain, if you will, if you're thinking about end-to-end supply chains. The other thing that's coming up a lot is vertical integration, because again, we're suddenly worried about control, because after all, if we have exploding pagers and like rare earths that like stop moving, then you have to be worried about what you control. Of course, we also have to scale up today. So we can't like say, fabulous, I'm going to increase my investments over the next 5 years, and then I'll be able to take on your volume. And your customer's like, I've already left long ago. I had to find somebody who could serve me now. So you need everything at once, which is a bit challenging. So in some cases, companies are moving towards vertical integration. In other cases, they're forming strategic partnerships. And even with competitors, because if it makes sense and you can scale up quickly, like there was in the healthcare supply chain, I'm not going to get exactly who it was because I can't remember off the top of my head, but I wrote an article. It was about like a aspirin type supplier, and they partnered with Walmart and a competitor, if you will. And basically it was a great way to get scale quickly and bring supply chains to be able to support, their customer base. So strategic win-wins partnerships are definitely key. And I mentioned leveraging advanced technologies like modern ERP, robotics, automation, additive manufacturing, etc. And I will talk more about that. And then we have, resiliency and efficiency are still needed. Lean is another topic that relates to this. Sure, still needed. Of course, you want to use common sense, figure out what your customers, really are asking for. Don't have waste. All these things are good. You want to be resilient and efficient, but it's not going to get you from producing, like, for example, shipbuilding is just such a great example. We produce like 2 ships a year. Okay. So if we double production to 4, sounds like really exciting that we've doubled production, but it's, we need 100. So that's not going to get us anywhere. So we have to be much better than just resilient and efficient. So what do? We start with talent. You always have to start with talent. People are always your number one asset, or at least that's how I see it. The clients with the best leaders and talent, even if they have like not as good of everything else, could be kind of poor systems, not the best processes, but they always succeed. Whereas the clients that have no talent or whatever, minimal, but they have the best system ever, like they don't know what to do with it though. So it's just always more successful to like, you have to pay attention to talent. So we could do another whole hour on this, but we won't. But in essence, let's just leave it at this. Like talent is changing from, I'm going to go out and hire an executive recruiter and find talent that I need. Well, it doesn't exist. They've retired or they're gone or they're $2 million if you're talking about an AI, person or something. It sounds crazy, but some of them are going for those kinds of rates. So instead, we have to build talent. That's really a key thing. And that doesn't mean we have to be doing, the good news is you're on a webinar. So it's part of building talent, right? So we have, there's a lot of things you can do. You have to think outside the box. And you have to engage talent, find hidden talent. over the last 20 years of consulting, I've yet to meet a client that didn't have a hidden talent, meaning somebody that was like, they were underestimating that, like, had a lot of the solutions, but they weren't paying attention to. So find those people, value them, retain them. We also need to be customer focused. So that sounds like, well, yeah, duh. Of course you want to be customer focused, but it means something new now. So it's not just, what we used to do. Now, supply chain visibility is, we need end-to-end visibility. We need predictability. Like, for example, there's softwares out there now where it will know exactly where you're, like, if you're, let's say you have materials coming in on a container ship, or if you're selling some consumer items, it knows where the container ship is, which ports, has it been unloaded, what's going on, like, exactly. And then there's, like, of course it takes it to transportation. It's on what truck. There's an accident along the way. It's causing 2 hours delay or something. So basically, and then even like we'll crowdsource things. Like there's this, I don't know, action going on in Venezuela that could cause this, like, or well, let's go with the Suez Canal. There's this action going on in the Middle East. And so the Suez Canal, there's going to be delayed entry through the Suez Canal. So like reroute this way or that way. And it updates ETAs. So there's like sophisticated, not everybody needs that level of sophistication, but basically you have to move towards having a better feel for what's going on in your end-to-end supply chain, and how you would change with and be responsive and predictive, and also figure out like where you need to be going in the future. So it's like it's just not as easy. One way to put it. Execution has to be a priority. So no more like assumptions that we used to use like even 5 years ago. So it's like throw them out the window. They're no good anymore. You have to figure out what's really going on. I actually just got off a SIOP call, which we'll talk about in a minute, but sales, inventory, operations planning, and we were talking just about, like, in this case, I was with operations. They're like, well, those salespeople are drinking something. What are the, are these quotes really going to come to fruition? When are they going to come to fruition? And like, so we have to be thinking about things a little differently. And there's some advanced technologies you can use, but some of it's just like common sense and talking to people. To be honest with you, the 80-20 many times is uncommon common sense, but execution is key. Because like, tell you what, you can have the best plans, but if no one is doing, if you don't have execution, nothing happens. So it doesn't matter. And I mentioned speed and scale, but like I said, customers are not willing to wait. So you can't just tell them, yeah, I'll give it to you in 26 weeks. And it's like, I'm not going to do anything to prove my lead time. That's what the lead time is, because I'm getting too much stuff. But then, next month, you're going to say, well, darn, I lost all my quotes. Now I don't have enough stuff because I, wasn't willing to figure out ways to be faster here. So it's a catch-22. And then scale, like I said, you can't go from 2 to 100 or 1,000 by just doubling capacity, even though that sounds like a lot. It's not. And then you want to be predictive and transformative. Different from being resilient and efficient. You still want to be resilient and efficient, of course, because you have to have EBITDA, profitability, and working capital. But you want to be predictive and transformative. So sales, inventory, operations planning is by all means a great tool that one of the things that I focus on in my consulting practice. But it is really proven to be a great way to navigate all these changing demand and supply situations, and in a way that is going to be the most profitable and with the highest level of working capital. It's not like a magic formula, unfortunately, for all of us, but basically it's people, process, and technologies, and how do we use them in a way that's predictive and transformative. But in essence, it's how do you align your demand with your supply? That's what we've been talking about here. Like, we need more energy, but we have lack of supply, right? So we have to increase the supply somehow. by doing things like increasing solar, utilizing some of Venezuela's capacity. We have a lot of capacity in the US, so there's, demand supply kind of things. We also have to think about what we need in terms of capacity, staffing, training. We talked about AI and like the high skilled roles, like what are we going to need in what area of the operation, when, so that we can prepare. What critical materials, long lead time materials will we need? What kind of contracts are we working out with suppliers? Maybe we need a strategic partnership. Maybe we just need offload capacity for 3 months while we pursue another avenue. Or how do we like keep some facilities intact during low volumes? Like I've had a few clients this last year where part of what we did is figure out how do we utilize the people we have. We can reduce temporary resources, but we wanted to like keep the skills we have, but in a way that would still be profitable for the company. So we reallocated them to different facilities or different roles. So I can go on about this topic for sure for an hour, if not, all day, because it's what I do. But nevertheless, the idea is you want to look at simulations, trade-offs, and find ways to be successful. You can download the ebook that's here. It's free, and it'll give you some additional insights. And actually, we're working on a revised edition for this year as well to add changing conditions. And then also the AI and advanced technologies, there's an ebook that you could download for that as well, with a lot of suggestions from some trusted advisors and experts in the area. But basically what I would say is that it's a little tricky. You don't want to be following fads. Like I have found that is the fastest way to failure, is to follow fads. So don't do that. At the same time, you must start doing something that's going to be, AI is going to change the way we do business. Now, AI is incorporated in most of the modern ERP systems, but to what degree and where? And do you need to wait for your ERP person to do it? By no means should you be doing that, because there's opportunities to better utilize it. So, again, we could talk about this topic for at least 8 hours, but there's AI related to PSYOP, some advanced planning systems. There's digital twins, so you can do virtual simulations. There's AR, VR. There's like AI enabled factories. Actually, there's some really interesting stories about that. If I had time to like tell you about them, I would, because there's some ways that they've been building talent, as I was saying, rapidly with people who had nothing to do with manufacturing successfully to run AI enabled factories, which is great, but it all takes something. And so they should, you wanted to dynamically optimize and produce some predictive insights. And so we do have a download link here as well for you to gain some additional ideas. And of course, we can ask questions. We're wrapping up here, so please put questions in the chat. And I see that there are things in the chat, but I figured I'd wait till I got through this last slide. So I started to talk about this. So what do we see coming down the pipe? Well, there is a lot of investment coming on board. There is still a lot of like instability, craziness going on, tariffs, changing conditions. On the other hand, I talked about the 3 levers for economic growth, and they are trending in the right direction. And what I see coming on and what I see across lands is the winners are going to be separated from the losers at a rate that's not happened, I don't even know if ever in history. And there'll be more opportunities than any other time in history, if not like maybe the Great Depression was the other opportunity. However, I don't expect the Great Depression, but nevertheless, during the Great Depression, those companies that like invested in their future, not like wildly or anything, but took some strong, smart path forward, were successful and went to the top of their industry for the next like multiple decades. Well, that same type of situation is going to happen here, because there are so many changes going on when you move from global supply chains towards regional, and China's not going to go away anytime soon. You can't do that. They produce at scale. So they're still going to be producing, but you have to diversify your risk and like be more nimble in what you're doing. So basically, as that is happening, systems and people who have been ordering based on past history and, all those kinds of like theoretical good practices are going to be ordering all the wrong things, for example, because everything has moved. So, and customers are moving around and changing, like they're buying each other up. Some customers that are slow are losing business, replaced by other ones. So you're going to have to be doing it better. So I guess the deal is that the companies that are innovative, predictive, forward thinking will have more opportunities than ever before. It's just great. And anybody on this call, you're going to have vast opportunities in your career and for your business. On the other hand, if you're more in the like, I'm ready to retire, I feel, that sounds like too much work for me, which is understandable. It is going to be a problem in those types of companies because they will be left in the dust, and they probably will get absorbed and or just decide to close up shop if they're a family business, or go out of business in worst case scenarios. So that's what I see coming. I think I have contact information, which I'll move to, so that you can like sign up for I have a free newsletter as well. And I'd be happy to add anybody that wants. And let me see what messages I have here. So we have, let's see. Okay, so there's a lot of messages. That's a good thing. Has anyone been successful in getting a refund from a shipper, in this case UPS, that charged a 25% tariff fee, about $4,000 for Canadian goods, and actually not subject to the tariff? I would say yes. There are actually groups of people. I have some trusted advisors I could refer to that. I mean, it's almost a full-time job keeping track of FedEx, UPS, and others, but those are the two big ones. Because there's a lot of variables, and they'll charge what they can, and like if you fight them, you eventually you can get it back, but there's a lot of opportunities. So yeah, the answer is yes. I can like send me an email and I can put you in touch with people. Do our trading policy and tariffs help China getting an advantage on their exports? Well, I guess maybe this means like, do our tariff policies make Europe maybe go to them? Is that maybe what that's meaning? If whoever put that, if you could add, if that's what you mean, it could happen where like, because we're demanding more, that they could go to other people, because China will, because they're a manufacturing economy. Listen to the John Tulak webinar on global trade. He and I had a discussion a couple of months ago, because he was saying that they have got to change, because they're not going to be able to sell all their manufactured goods anymore. It's just not going to be possible, because they make too many for the world to even need. And so they have to move towards a different philosophy, but they're not necessarily willing to do that. So they will lowball prices. So if somebody wants a lowball price, they probably will take them up on it. On the other hand, Europe also was cut off with rare earths, and they had other the world supply chain is realizing that they need to have a diversified approach. So I would say that if anything, China knows that they need the volume from the US, because like I said, they have the world's output, but we're the main customer. So it's like there's many trade-offs, but I would say there's some risk, but there's actually it can be mitigated quite a bit, and there's things going in both directions on that front, if you will. But I don't think that is going to cause like our volumes to go down, other than the business instability piece of the equation, which we are largely over. Do you have tips to take a SIOP process from local one site to global? For sure. Like actually, one of the things I'd throw out right away, because we've done this with many clients, is pick something that is where you can get a process going in like a quarter. I usually pick a quarter, like 3 months. Now, can you get the whole thing going? Is it going to be perfect? No, no, and no. But you pick like a pilot process that you can like get something that's directionally correct. Don't worry about perfection, but directionally correct. And here's the key. It has to give you something that you want. Like basically you want information to make a business decision. If it just gives you like fluffy information, like who cares? Like just don't even do the SIOP process. You want something that's going to tell you like, where do I need to focus sales? Where do I need to like spend money and capacity or invest or something? So you want something meaningful, but at a scope that's small enough so that you can have a win. And then you can easily carry that out to other sites. Because generally, although some of my clients don't have the same system in all their sites, but we actually went from like, I mean, it was like ridiculous, even with different systems, we were able to move it to a second site with like, I don't know, like 10% of the amount of time, because like you had learned the processes, the people, and sometimes the systems. So you could definitely be successful. And I definitely recommend starting with 1 and moving to 3 and maybe less than 1. The link to the ebook, I will definitely include it in the archives as well. And I guess I'll go back to that page. But if you go to the website, there's a link on the website too. And what are a small manufacturing company that's been using QuickBooks Desktop mostly for invoices? Has anyone successfully identified a tool that will query QuickBooks invoice history to get us a summary table of the raw data like date, customer? Oh yeah. So you're trying to like do some kind of planning and or like a SIOP process. Well, QuickBooks is yes. The answer is yes. Like I actually had a client early on that's like been recognized as like highest growth company, or I don't remember there's some award. I forgot who gives out these awards for fast growing companies, but they went from like 5 million to like, I don't know, 100 million or something in a very short period of time. And they used QuickBooks to the maximum degree, and they could get some information out of there that was helpful for starting. We started a SIOP process with what they had in QuickBooks, but they also had, other like side systems. So the answer is yes, you can always get something started, but can you do everything you want to do? I mean, probably, definitely not, because QuickBooks does have limitations, but you can get something started for sure. Yep. And thank you, Tony, because like you, so I think, let's see what time it is here. Oh, perfect. I have 1 minute left and I just got 3 questions. So I'd be happy to go back to, send me an email if you have additional questions. Oh, well, I was going to go back to the link for PsyOps for whoever asked me that. Let me see. Here it is. Okay. So there's the, that's not good. It's not even right. So, okay, well, let me fix it up for you. So I will put the link in the archives, and I'll send it out. But also, I would like to invite everyone to join us for our industry event and member appreciation event on February 11th. Is that right, Tony? I shouldn't have, I think it's correct. February 11th, and it's going to be at Heroes in Ontario. So we have it's going to be a networking event, and also we'll talk about what's going on in the industry. So I'd love to have you join us. It's member appreciation. So if you're an Apex member, it's for free. If you've presented for us before, or you're interested in attending, let us know. And you also, no matter what, you can come. We have a small price for folks who are aside from that. And let's see, I think there might be one other question here, but I don't know if I can see it. So nevertheless, if you have any other questions, just send me a note and join us at our industry event. And we're also going to be having another webinar in February. And I believe that one is on agentic AI. So, take it from here to the next steps with AI and how you can improve your businesses. So I look forward to seeing you all there, and please join us. You also can look at our website, and that's ASCM. inlandempire.org. So ASCM-IE.org, I believe, or is it actually, you know what, that's not right. It's oh Lord. Well, Inland Empire. Now I forgot what it is. Well, that's not good. I will send it in the session as well, or you can go to our old one, which forwards there, which is apics-ie.org. So I look forward to seeing you all there, and thank you very much.